26. If it isn't in the file, can you prove it? 6 months have passed since the Reynolds home recorded. David has settled into the property. Mike and Jennifer are enjoying their new home, and Sarah has closed several more transactions. The Reynolds file isn't something she thinks about very often anymore. Then Michael, her designated broker, calls, "Sarah, can you come into my office for a minute?" Every agent knows that sentence gets your attention. Sarah walks in and sees the Reynolds transaction open on Michael's computer. Michael asks, "Remember this one?" "Of course." He scrolls through the file. "Tell me about the upstairs water intrusion." Sarah starts explaining. "Okay, Jennifer texted me after that monsoon. I think it was right before the inspection. Then the inspector found moisture near the window, and Mike had somebody look at it." Michael interrupts. "Don't tell me what you remember." He turns the computer toward her. "Show me the file." While you're inside a transaction, everything feels unforgettable. You remember every telephone call, every repair conversation, every deadline, and every argument. 6 months later, was the water intrusion reported Tuesday or Wednesday? Did the seller disclose it before or after the inspection? Did Mike agree to repair the flashing or replace it? Was the invoice ever received? Did Sarah send Daniel the updated information? What exactly did Jennifer say in that text? Memory starts getting fuzzy. Your memory is not your transaction management system. Arizona's record-keeping requirements are not simply administrative busywork. ARS Section 322151.01 establishes requirements concerning broker records. Your designated broker also needs systems for reviewing and maintaining transaction documentation. Think about the Reynolds transaction. Sarah's file should help reconstruct the story. It begins with the listing relationship and agency documentation. Then there are seller disclosures and property information. Marketing and pricing changes may create additional records. David's offer arrives. The Reynolds counter. David accepts. Escrow opens. Inspections occur. The BINSAR and seller response document the inspection negotiation. Repair documentation is generated. The appraisal creates another negotiation. Amendments or other written changes may follow. Closing documents finish the transaction. Each document becomes part of the story, but here's where modern transactions become complicated. Not everything happens on a form. Some of the most important conversations happen by text message. Jennifer texts, "We had water near the upstairs window after last night's storm." Mike texts, "We agreed to the revised price." Daniel emails Sarah regarding the appraisal. Maria emails requesting seller payoff information. If Sarah's brokerage requires transaction-related communications to be uploaded or retained, Sarah needs to follow that process. She shouldn't assume that because a conversation occurred on her personal phone, it can never become important. Let's look at an example. Suppose Mike calls Sarah and says, "Do not counter the second buyer. I want to proceed with David." That's an important client instruction. 6 months later, Mike complains, "Sarah never told me we had another offer." Now what? Sarah remembers the conversation perfectly. Mike remembers it differently. This is where documentation becomes valuable. A simple follow-up communication might have said, "Mike and Jennifer, confirming our conversation today, you have instructed me to continue negotiations with David and not counter the second offer at this time." Now there's a contemporaneous record of the instruction. Notice what Sarah isn't doing. She's not writing a 10-page memo after every telephone call. She's documenting important decisions, disclosures, instructions, changes, and transaction events in a manner consistent with her brokerage's procedures. Here's where agents can make another serious mistake. They wait until a complaint arrives and then try to recreate the file. Don't do that. Documentation should accurately reflect what occurred. Creating a false note 6 months later and dating it as though it were written during the transaction creates a much bigger problem than an incomplete file. Document the transaction while you're living the transaction. Michael continues reviewing Sarah's file. He opens the counteroffer, then the second offer, then the accepted documents. "This is good," he says. "I can tell which version was actually accepted." That matters because negotiations can create a paper trail very quickly. Offer, counteroffer, revised counteroffer, addendum, amendment, inspection notice, seller response, another amendment. If your file contains 5 documents called finalcontract.pdf, you're creating a future puzzle for yourself and your broker. Agents need a reliable system. Now Michael reaches the repair documentation. He sees the invoice relating to the roof work and the documentation connected to the upstairs moisture concern. Good. This tells me more than a note saying, "Seller fixed it." Exactly. Remember our discussion about vague repair language? Documentation can become particularly important when a buyer later claims an agreed repair was never completed. Then Michael asks Sarah another question. What about the chandelier? Sarah laughs. You remember that? I remember everything that almost delays recording. Sarah pulls up the communication showing how the issue was resolved before closing. That's what a transaction file should do. It should allow someone who wasn't standing beside Sarah during every conversation to understand what happened. This becomes especially important if ADRE ever reviews the transaction, if the brokerage receives a complaint, if litigation develops, or if one of the parties simply asks a question months later. The file doesn't guarantee nobody will ever complain. It gives the broker and agent an accurate record from which to respond. There's also a confidentiality issue. Keeping transaction records doesn't mean Sarah can post private client information on social media after closing, or casually tell another client Mike was desperate to sell and would have taken $605,000. Closing does not turn confidential client information into neighborhood gossip. Sarah still needs to handle information appropriately. Michael finishes reviewing the file. Overall, this one's in good shape. Sarah smiles. Can I go now? Michael laughs. Not yet. He closes the Reynolds file and says, I want to talk about something bigger. You did a good job getting this transaction closed. But being professional isn't just getting a deal across the finish line. He's right. Professionalism is what Sarah does when nobody is watching. It's how she protects confidential information, how she follows lawful client instructions, how she communicates bad news, how she handles mistakes, how she treats the other side, how she documents the file, and how she behaves after the commission has already been paid. That's where we'll go in Section 22. Loyalty, confidentiality, obedience, disclosure, and accountability. Professionalism after the commission check. Online discussion 1. Jennifer reports the upstairs water intrusion to Sarah by text message. Why can that communication become important to the transaction file? Answer. The message may help establish when Sarah first learned of the condition, what Jennifer reported, and how the information was subsequently handled. Material transaction communications should be retained according to applicable Arizona requirements and brokerage procedures rather than relying solely on the agent's memory. 2. Mike gives Sarah an important negotiation instruction by telephone. What practical step can Sarah take after the conversation? Answer. Sarah can appropriately confirm the material instruction in writing, such as through an email documenting the substance of the conversation. This creates a contemporaneous record and gives the client an opportunity to correct a misunderstanding while the transaction is still active. 3. 6 months after closing, Sarah realizes an important conversation was never documented. Should she create a note and backdate it to the transaction date? Answer. No. Sarah should never manufacture or falsify transaction documentation. If an accurate later note is appropriate under brokerage procedures, it should truthfully reflect when it was created and the circumstances. Falsifying the date or content of a record can create a much more serious compliance problem.